The motorcycle died right in the middle of nowhere. Not a sputter, not a warning, just silence. The engine cut out as the rider rolled down a long stretch of cracked rural road, fields stretching endlessly on both sides, the sky dimming into the deep orange of sunset. The biker coasted to a stop, tried the ignition again. Nothing. Once more. Still nothing. He exhaled slowly, pulling off his gloves. This wasn't just any rider. This was Victor Rook Hale, vice president of one of the most feared motorcycle clubs in the state. And right now, he was stranded, miles from the nearest town. No signal, no help, just farmland, and the sound of wind brushing through dry crops. Rook swung his leg off the bike, crouched down, and popped open the side panel. Fuel line was fine. Battery, maybe. He tried again. Click. Dead. Perfect, he muttered. Darkness was coming fast. Then, he saw it. A faint light in the distance. A farmhouse. Old. Weathered. But alive. Rook glanced back at his bike, then toward the fading road. No choice. He started walking. The farmhouse looked even worse up close. Wood peeling off the walls. Roof patched in uneven sections. A rusted tractor parked to the side like it hadn't moved in years. This wasn't a place people thrived. This was a place people barely held on to. Rook stepped up to the porch. Knocked. No answer. He knocked again, louder. Footsteps. Slow. Heavy. The door creaked open. An older man stood there. Late 50s, maybe early 60s. Lean, worn face. Sunburned skin. Hands that told stories of decades of hard labor. His eyes moved immediately to the leather vest. Then to the patches. Then back to Rook's face. Not fear. Not exactly. But caution. Evening, the farmer said. My bike broke down a mile back, Rook replied. Need a place to stay for the night. The farmer didn't answer right away. Just studied him. Measured him. Then nodded once. You got tools. Rook blinked slightly. Some. Bring the bike here. Rook tilted his head. You fix bikes. The farmer shrugged. I fix what breaks. That was all. No questions. No hesitation. Just a simple statement. Rook watched him for a second longer, then gave a short nod. All right. It took nearly 20 minutes to push the bike back. By the time they reached the farmhouse again, the sky had gone dark. The farmer had already set up a dim work light near the barn. Leave it there, he said. Rook stepped back as the farmer crouched beside the motorcycle. No rush. No wasted movement. Just quiet focus. You got a name? Rook asked. Daniel. Rook. Daniel nodded once. Then got to work. Rook expected hesitation, trial and error, guessing. Instead, Daniel moved like he'd known machines his entire life. He listened to the engine before touching anything, ran his fingers along the wiring, checked connections with precision. Within minutes, he had parts laid out beside him like a surgeon preparing for operation. You've done this before, Rook said. Daniel didn't look up. Machines talk. Most people just don't listen. Rook smirked slightly, then fell silent. Watching. Learning. Time passed. An hour. Then 2. The night grew colder. But Daniel didn't stop. Didn't complain. Didn't ask for anything. Just worked. At one point, Rook stepped closer. You should take a break. Daniel shook his head. If I stop, I lose the rhythm. What rhythm? Daniel tightened a bolt carefully. The one that tells me what's wrong. Rook leaned against the barn wall, arms crossed. This wasn't normal. Most people would have asked questions. Who he was. Where he came from. Why he rode with a club like his. Daniel asked nothing. And somehow, that said more than anything else could. Around midnight, the engine came back to life. A low, steady rumble filled the barn. Clean. Smooth. Perfect. Rook stared at the bike. Then at Daniel. That was it. Daniel wiped his hands on an old cloth. Loose ignition wire. Worn connection. Easy fix. Didn't look easy. Daniel shrugged. Most things aren't. Until they are. Rook let out a quiet breath. Then reached into his jacket. Pulled out cash. A thick fold. He held it out. Daniel didn't take it. Keep it. Rook frowned. You just spent hours fixing my bike. You needed help. That's not how this works. Daniel finally looked at him. Maybe not where you come from. Silence settled between them. Rook slowly lowered the money. You sure? Daniel nodded once. You can sleep in the spare room if you want. It gets cold out here. Rook studied him, then gave a small nod. Thanks. The house was simple. Old furniture. Faded walls. But clean. Cared for. Rook sat at the edge of the bed, staring at his hands. He'd met thousands of people. Dealers. Riders. Men who feared him. Men who respected him. Men who pretended to. But this was different. No fear. No expectation. Just help. It didn't sit right. Or maybe it did. More than anything else in a long time. Before sunrise, Rook was already outside. The bike stood ready. Perfect. He ran a hand over the seat, then glanced back at the farmhouse. Lights were still off. Daniel was probably asleep. Rook reached into his pocket, pulled out the cash again, walked to the door, and tucked it under a loose plank near the frame. Not charity. Payment. Whether the man wanted it or not. Rook stepped back, started the engine. The bike roared to life. Then, he paused, looked at the house one last time. You should have taken the money, he muttered quietly. Then he rode off into the rising light. Daniel woke up an hour later, stepped outside, noticed the empty space where the bike had been. No surprise there. But then, he saw it. The money, tucked under the plank. He stared at it for a long moment, then picked it up slowly, counted it. His expression didn't change, but his grip tightened slightly, because that amount of money could fix the roof, buy supplies, keep the farm running another month, maybe more. He exhaled slowly, looked down at it again, then shook his head once. Shouldn't have done that, he murmured. But he didn't put it back. He didn't know that by the time the sun fully rose, the sound of engines would shake the ground beneath his farm, and everything about his quiet life was about to change. The sound started low, a distant vibration rolling across the fields like faraway thunder. Daniel paused mid-step outside the barn, a wrench still in his hand. He looked up. The horizon shimmered slightly in the early morning light. Then, he heard it clearly. Engines. Not one. Not a few. Dozens. Coming fast. Daniel's grip tightened around the wrench. Out here, that kind of sound didn't mean anything good. He stepped forward slowly, boots crunching against gravel, eyes scanning the road that cut through his land. And then they appeared. One bike, then 5, then 20, then more. A long line of motorcycles poured down the dirt road like a black wave, engines roaring, dust rising behind them. Daniel didn't move, didn't run. He just stood there, waiting. The first bike came to a stop just a few feet from him. The rider removed his helmet. Victor Rook Hale. Daniel's eyes narrowed slightly. Morning, he said. Rook didn't smile, didn't nod. He just studied Daniel for a second. Then more bikes pulled in behind him. And more. And more. Within seconds, the entire front of the farmhouse was filled. Engines idled. Men sat still, watching. Daniel glanced around. 200, maybe more. Leather cuts. Patches. Heart faces. The kind of presence that usually came with trouble. Real trouble. He looked back at Rook. You forget something? Daniel asked calmly. Rook stepped off the bike. Boots hit the ground. Heavy. Deliberate. No. Daniel waited. Silence stretched between them. Then Rook reached into his jacket. Pulled something out. Held it up. The money. Daniel frowned slightly. You left it, Rook said. I know. Why? Daniel wiped his hands slowly on his jeans. Because I didn't fix your bike for that. A murmur rippled through the bikers behind Rook. Small. Almost unnoticeable. But there. Rook's jaw tightened just a fraction. Do you have any idea who I am? He asked. Daniel met his eyes. Man with a broken bike, he said simply. Another ripple. This time stronger. Some of the bikers shifted slightly. Not aggressive. Just surprised. Rook took a slow step forward. You don't get it, he said quietly. People don't do things for free. Daniel shrugged. Maybe they should. Rook stared at him. Long. Hard. Then glanced back at the house. At the peeling paint. The patched roof. The land barely holding together. You needed that money, Rook said. Daniel didn't deny it. Didn't argue. Maybe, he said. But that doesn't change why I helped you. Rook let out a breath. Slow. Controlled. Then something shifted in his expression. Something almost respectful. He turned. Looked back at the hundreds of bikers behind him. Then back at Daniel. You got anything else broken around here? Rook asked. Daniel blinked once. What? Rook gestured toward the farm. Roof looks like it's about to cave in. Tractors rusted out. Fences falling apart. Daniel's eyes narrowed. That's not your problem. Rook shook his head slightly. No, he said. It's not. Then his voice hardened. But you made it mine. Silence. Then, Rook raised his hand. And everything changed. Bikers started moving. Not toward Daniel. Toward the farm. One group headed straight for the barn. Another toward the house. A few already unloading tools from saddlebags. Hammers. Chains. Equipment. Daniel stepped forward quickly. Hey, what are you doing? Roque didn't stop walking. Fixing what's broken. I didn't ask for that. Roque turned slightly, just enough to look at him. You didn't ask for money either. Daniel stopped. That hit. Harder than anything else. I'm not charity, Daniel said, voice lower now. Roque's expression didn't change. This isn't charity. He stepped closer. Close enough that Daniel could see the faint scars lining his face. This is respect. The word hung in the air. Heavy. Unavoidable. Behind them, the sound of work had already begun. Wood being moved. Metal clanging. Engines shutting off. Boots hitting dirt. Daniel looked over his shoulder. Men were already climbing onto his roof, assessing damage. Others were dragging tools toward the broken tractor, moving like they'd done this 1,000 times before. Organized. Efficient. Not chaos. Purpose. He turned back to Roque. You brought all these people for this? Roque shook his head. I brought them because a man fixed my bike in the middle of nowhere, asked for nothing, and expected nothing. His voice dropped slightly. That doesn't happen anymore. Daniel didn't know what to say to that. Didn't know how to respond. Because deep down, he knew it was true. Roque stepped back, giving him space. You can stand there and watch, he said. Or you can tell us where to start. Daniel hesitated. Just for a moment. Then, he pointed. The fence line on the east side collapsed last week, he said quietly. Roque nodded once. Done. He turned, signaling to a group nearby. They moved instantly. No hesitation. No questions. Daniel watched them go. Watched strangers start rebuilding parts of his life he'd been slowly losing. Piece by piece. And something in his chest shifted. Hours passed. The sun climbed higher. The farm transformed. The roof was stripped and replaced with solid panels. The tractor, once rusted and dead, was taken apart and rebuilt. Parts swapped, engine cleaned. The fence lines stretched new and strong across the field. Even the barn doors were repaired. Everything Daniel had put off, everything he couldn't afford, everything he'd accepted as good enough, was being made right. Not halfway, not temporarily, properly, by people who didn't know him anything. By late afternoon, the engines were quiet again. The work was done. Daniel stood in the middle of it all, looking around, not recognizing his own land. Roque walked up beside him. It'll hold, he said. Daniel nodded slowly. Yeah. Silence settled. Different now. Not tense. Not uncertain. Just real. Daniel looked at him. You didn't have to do this. Roque shrugged. Yeah, I did. Daniel frowned slightly. Why? Roque took a moment before answering. Then, because you reminded me what it's supposed to look like. Daniel didn't fully understand that. But he didn't need to. Not completely. Keep the money, Roque added. You'll need it. Daniel let out a quiet breath. Then gave a small nod. All right. Roque smirked faintly. That was enough. He turned back toward his bike. Then paused. Next time something breaks, he said without turning around. You call someone. Daniel glanced at the farm. Then back at him. Maybe I will. Roque nodded once. Not at his bike. Then the engines roared back to life. One by one. Then all at once. A thunder that rolled across the land. But this time, it didn't feel like a warning. It felt like something else. Something earned. Something real. Daniel stood there as the bikers rode off. Dust rising behind them. The sound fading into the distance. Until it was gone. Silence returned. But it wasn't the same silence as before. Daniel looked down at his hands. Then out at his land. Fixed. Strong. Alive again. And for the first time in a long while. He didn't feel like he was holding it together alone. He walked back toward the house. Stopped at the door. And looked out one last time. A small smile forming on his face. Guess people still listen, he muttered. Then he stepped inside. And closed the door on a life that had just changed. Because he chose to help a stranger.